Hello, my name is Pratt and welcome to my presentation for the MAN1106 module. In this 10-minute presentation, I'll be analyzing the human rights and sustainable consumption practices of FIFA with specific analysis of the 2010 South African FIFA World Cup. Within this presentation, I'll be covering the following. I'll start with a brief overview of both FIFA and the 2010 South African World Cup. I will then talk about the human rights in South Africa and what FIFA did in response to this. I'll be talking about both exploitation of children and then the displacement of local South Africans in preparation for this event. That will be followed by sustainable consumption practices, with specific focus on what FIFA did in preparation for the 2010 World Cup, and then an analysis on the infrastructure that was used for the event and how well or poorly that was managed in regards to sustainability. Following that, I'll be talking about both what went well and then consequently what could have been done better in the future when hosting future World Cups, and of course finishing off with my references. Leading into the background information for this case study, starting with who is or what is FIFA. FIFA is a non-profit organization that describes itself as an international governing body of association football, futsal, and beach soccer. It's the highest governing body of association football. FIFA was founded in 1904 and is most known for hosting the FIFA World Cup every 4 years. With regards to this case study specifically, the 2010 FIFA World Cup was held in South Africa across 9 cities, with the opening and final games played in the host city, Johannesburg. This case study is an isolated event run by FIFA, and I chose this case study specifically as it highlights major human rights issues and sustainable consumption practices that clearly outline what FIFA are doing well, but also areas that can be improved moving forwards. For our first slide, I'm going to be talking about human rights issues. I'm going to be talking specifically on the exploitation of children through the use of human trafficking and forced child begging. Starting off with human trafficking, the 2010 World Cup was unfortunately host to human trafficking for sexual exploitation of children. The event attracted mass media attention concerning an anticipated increase in sex workers leading up to the event. Estimates were broadly ranging from 40,000 to 100,000 women and children being exploited in this way. However, FIFA did say that the data did not support the hypothesis that thousands of foreign women and children were trafficked into South Africa to meet the increased in demand in paid sex. Although there is little systematic research, it is difficult to assess whether the evidence gap is a reflection of the success of mitigation strategies from FIFA, or whether or not the absence of baseline data led to a weakness in monitoring the issue. In addition to this, forced child begging was also a problem for the 2010 World Cup host nation. In media reports cited an increase in migrants trafficking into South Africa by organized crime gangs for the purpose of child begging. It was assumed that with an increase of tourism into a country where poverty rates are high, sympathy towards children begging onto the street would lead to more successful begging rather than adults doing so. This next slide is a continuation of the previous slide about human rights, however shifting its focus over to displacement. Displacement of children through forced evictions for infrastructure development and street clearances is a common issue faced by FIFA when hosting the FIFA World Cup tournaments. With specific reference to South Africa, this was an issue in a variety of ways. The South Africa 2010 FIFA World Cup saw 600 street children moved to what was described as an apartheid-style relocation or transit camps 30 kilometers away from Cape Town, leading to leading to an increase in social problems, including sexual violence against children. Other reports suggest children and some adults with young children were charged with loitering and punished with fines they simply could not afford, just so that they would be arrested and removed from the streets. In addition to this, prior to the World Cup taking place, street children were housed in Westville prison, exposing them to both violence and rape. Furthermore, there was also a push to, quote, clear the streets. Um, there was a fear that crime and poverty would frighten away global tourism and investment from international trade, which led to South Africa wanting to portray a safe and desirable image by cleaning the streets. Moving on to sustainable consumption practices, there was an environmental sustainability plan run by FIFA for the 2010 World Cup, under which they planned on greening the event. The plan was to develop a Green Goal 2010 program that would mitigate some of the environmental impacts of the event, as well as secure a positive social, economic, and environmental legacy, ranging from waste management and recycling to biodiversity protection to public transport upgrades. However, due to a lack of coordination, this program unfortunately didn't end up happening. There has been a growth and desire for hosting environmentally sustainable events in recent years, with the likes of both the Olympics and FIFA World Cups, each having different projects with goals towards being as sustainable as possible. Continuing on to the sustainability of the infrastructure used for this event, there were 10 stadiums used, 5 of which were built from the ground up solely for this event, and 5 pre-existing stadiums which were renovated. The Moses Mapeda Stadium, which you can see in the bottom left, is a prime example of how stadiums used in a global sporting tournament can be used moving forward in a sustainable manner. The Moses Mapeda Stadium is now used for rugby union, football, concerts, and even bungee jumping, making the construction of the stadium much more financially logical. Although some of the stadiums used in the 2010 World Cup have been used after the event, several of the other stadiums have built especially for the FIFA World Cup have never been used since the World Cup ended. The perfect example can be seen when looking at the OD Stadium in the bottom right-hand corner now. The OD Stadium in Mabopane is one of the largest South African stadiums, and due to a lack of maintenance, has fallen into a total disrepair state since 2010. The stadium has not been used at all since the FIFA World Cup, and with its seating capacity of 60,000 people, is the third largest sports stadium in the country. Usage of stadiums that were built in such large events are mostly out of use now due to unreasonable running costs. Local teams can't fund playing in these stadiums because of the facilities and the maintenance costs are simply too high. This leads to the abandonment of stadiums that cost a total of 1.1 billion US dollars, according to the South African government. Closing in now, what was done well with how FIFA ran the 2010 South Africa World Cup with regards to human rights and sustainable consumption practices? Although it wasn't done entirely sustainably, the event was seen as a general success, and South Africa was presented as a beautiful country filled with culture and a love for football, which was one of the goals leading into the event. Additionally, as an organization, FIFA came out of it successfully. However, on the flip side, South Africa, and especially the local South Africans, didn't necessarily do so. But as an organization, FIFA did what they intended on doing, which was making revenue. And finally, recommendations. In future, I believe that international sporting events as large as the World Cup should be hosted in countries that have pre-existing facilities or at least realistic plans to use the facilities once the events have concluded. This not only eradicates the issue of having to displace local citizens, but also reduces the abandonment of stadiums, which is largely more sustainable. Additionally, I believe that these wide-scale events should be hosted in countries that can simply afford to do so. This includes being able to afford stadium renovations and maintenance, employment with reasonable pay, and being able to afford sustainable systems to reduce harmful environmental impacts. Being able to afford all of these things will likely lead to a lack of shortcuts being taken, which will have a knock on effect on the host countries in the long term. That concludes my presentation, so I'd just like to say a quick thank you for watching, and I look forward to answering any further questions in class. Thank you. And just past here are my 2 pages of references.